I'm originally from Taiwan, and my favorite ice cream flavor is probably butter pecan from Haagen-Dazs as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I have to go with Pastor David Larry. My favorite is mint chocolate chip as well. But when it comes to Haagen-Dazs, I know what you guys mean. Like there's a uniqueness about Haagen-Dazs that my wife loves. So thank you all for sharing that. And thank you all so much for just faithfully serving and ministering during this pandemic. Um, so why don't we go in the reverse direction then, and we can start with Pastor Amy. When the first question I would love to ask is, what has been the biggest challenge for you during this time?
Um, so the biggest challenge for me is losing the face-to-face time with my students. And what I mean by that is the time before and after ministry. So, like I said, my group of kids, they range from 6th to 12th grade. And for teenagers, they don't care so much about what you're teaching them, but they care more about whether or not you care and how you embrace them. So I really value the time that I get to spend to them before our service time and after. And it's a big chunk. Sometimes on a Sunday, I could be spending 2 hours before actual service and then 3 hours after that to get to know them, to even just do homework with them. And now that we're here at home, I lose all of that time to do face to face. I don't know, I guess just building relationship. And that's something that the internet can't make up. So I guess that would be the most challenging part for me. And even just time that I get to spend with them in the car, driving them around, that's also been lost. So I feel like staying connected with them has been difficult because I've lost all of these opportunities, and really doing it over Zoom doesn't make up for it. So that would be mine, the most challenging part.
Personally, for me, I think seeing my kids as a blessing from God has been a challenge right now. Uh, I got 9 and a 6-year-old, so they're constantly in need. It's doing church work and my teaching work, but foremost, I'm a husband and a father at home with kids being at home 24/7. So just a personal balancing at home and work has been challenging. Um, just strictly church-wise, I think it's challenging to constantly make new decisions that you're unfamiliar with. We are, we've been pastoring for a while, so there are things that pop up where you obviously have to make new decisions, but this is kind of all at once. Everything's new. So staying connected with the congregants definitely been tough, but in our context, because we have many young adults in their 20s to, maybe mid 50s, they're very familiar with how to stay in touch online on their own. They're very tech savvy, but it's been tough to constantly make church-wise decisions where every decision we feel like is new and no one's done it before. So kind of getting that guidance from somebody who's been there before is not there. So that's been kind of tricky and tough for us.
I resonate with my colleagues and the things that they've shared. I think all of that for sure. I remember, well, I read somewhere one of my friends saying that the challenge has pre-coronavirus for a lot of people was like, how do we leave our work at home? I'm sorry, leave our work at work and not bring it home. In the different fields that we're in, and as ministers, as pastors, it's always a challenge. But during this coronavirus pandemic, there is no separation. The place of work is the home, and so like, when do we shut that off and when do we turn that off? And in our home right now, our my in-laws are with us, which is an amazing thing. They're awesome, and I love having them there. But we have 7 people in a 3-bedroom home right now. And so privacy is a difficult thing for me to come by, and to have Zoom meetings without kids screaming in the background or climbing up to see who I'm talking to has been a challenge. So really being able to feel like I'm or overcoming the feeling that I'm neither here nor there. I think that's been a challenge of working from home during this season. The other thing is, yeah, just um, the ability to see uh, the larger community, the congregation in one fell swoop and have feedback. Obviously, preaching to a camera is our necessity during the season, but we cannot see their reaction. We can't engage with them. We can't give them a hug afterwards. And so the ministry of the pulpit always is informed by the ministry of the day-to-day, right? And so in conversations with people, hearing them and their needs, that's what we bring up to the pulpit and seek to bring biblical gospel-centered answers to the challenges that they face. But at this point, it's unless you jump on a Zoom call or get on a phone or things like that, it's become a lot harder to be able to engage with a bunch of people and have FaceTime with them, to be able to have that connection and that rapport that builds the credibility and builds a relational capital to bring that into the pulpit. So that's been a challenge, yeah, particular to this season.
Thank you. I definitely resonate with having a 3-year-old right now who feels like a Category 5 hurricane. We have a 2-month-old newborn that was born the week before this coronavirus hit really hard in Texas. And so I definitely, feel pressure and stress that I hadn't really felt before. Kevin DeYoung once wrote about having children, rather than going through firsthand stress, meaning that, especially when they're young, it's not that they're personally stressed out, but they experience something called secondhand stress. It's like the parents are so stressed out with whatever they're doing, or the parents are so stressed out trying to do something for the child that it's almost counterproductive, that they want to do something fun. So it's like going on a trip to Disney, and they go to Disney and the parents are stressed out the whole time. And therefore the child, although while enjoying it because of the stress of the parents, they're unable to truly enjoy it. And I find myself kind of falling to that same pitfall where my son is doing fine. He's being a wonderful 3-year-old, just living out his God-given calling and doing all that stuff. But how would you say then, as you guys have been at home, and while also, yes, thinking about the spiritual family of our congregation and church, how have you found yourself being challenged, edified, and sanctified by trying to balance family, ministry, and all the other hats that you have to put on?
I think definitely, sanctification often begins with the awareness of sin, and that's certainly been brought to the forefront. I think, people talk about how exposing the COVID-19 has been for us, exposing our hearts and peeling back the layers. I think, yeah, certainly it's been something that has revealed at church structurally and at an ecclesiastical level, it's exposing blind spots, weak spots, things that should have been shored up before, and certainly at a personal level, showing yeah, just areas of shortcoming and impatience and things. But one of the things that has been helpful for sure in terms of that work and home balance is really creating a sense of healthy expectations with my family. So because disappointment lives within that gap between our expectation and our reality, right? So if your expectation is, hey, dad's at home or mom's at home and they're going to see you during these hours because the rest of the hours they're working, then anything beyond that is a bonus. But if they just see us at home all the time and they're available and it's dad, it's mom, they're available and we shoo them away, then there's going to be disappointment there. So I think creating a healthy sense of expectation helps to mitigate against disappointment. And so it creates the need and the space to have conversation, to talk about it, to talk about how do you feel and why do you feel this way about the coronavirus and about daddy being home or mom being home. And so I think in that sense, it's been healthy to really be able to engage in conversations. Being stuck with people, I say that in the best sense of the word because it's our family, but being together with them will do one of two things. We hear about the incidences of domestic violence increasing and how 911 calls from children have been on the rise during this pandemic. That's one way that it will go. The other way it will go is we learn to love one another, relate to each other, embrace each other, and to seize this rather than a time to simply survive and scramble to figure it out, but really to steward the time well. So I don't know if I'm being sanctified. I'm being exposed for sure, and ideas are coming into my mind that I need to be more like Jesus.
Yeah, I think
Um,
regular
okay.
check-in with the spouse and kids and staff definitely is necessary. I think it's in the beginning when this all began, when we didn't really know when this was all going to end. I think we got into this kind of more emergency mode for about, you know what, 2, 3 weeks, let's last. There wasn't that much regular conversation. It was kind of like, let's last this out. But once that month passed, I think everyone realized this is a regular part of our life now. We don't know when it's going to end. And I think that's when, for us in my family and as well as staff, we realized, okay, things have to go back into somewhat normal mode to some degree. And what I mean by normal is, I know things aren't normal, but to be able to do our regular staff meetings, but spend much more time checking in with each other, how each other are doing, and respectfully planning. I feel like since this pandemic, my wife and I have been planning much more, because every day there's more stuff to do with less space, and I feel like almost less time. I know a lot of people are saying we're home all day and we have more time, but because we're learning new things, sometimes I've been feeling like there's less time right now. So I think respectfully just getting together and setting up regular schedules to just commit to each other and talk and making sure that you're checking in with each other has been very helpful.
So I'm single, and I do share some of your, I guess, stresses in terms of just a different norm, right? We're all getting used to a different norm, and I think for a single person right now, it's to be intentional with everything that I'm doing, especially because I am alone. I feel like when you have people around you, there's accountability, but when you're single and I live in a 1-bedroom apartment by myself, I just have to be very intentional about how I'm spending my time. And, Christ calls us to surrender every thought to him and submit in our every thought. So I think for me right now, that is the biggest challenge because it's hard. It's really hard to practice discipline, especially when no one's really keeping you accountable. And I've been working from home for about, I guess, 2 months now, and it's been great. I'm much more creative at home because this is my space. But at the same time, I really do feel like my work and my personal life have blended together. And at first it was really hard, but I've learned to really embrace it. So I feel like at this point, I'm definitely being more productive, and I've grown from since we first were asked to stay home. But right now, the biggest challenge is to keep with it. I feel like all of the routines have been taken away from us, and they were acting as bumpers in our lives, helping us stay on track. And now that it's gone, everyone's being tested in some shape or form. And for me personally, it's just not getting lazy and sticking with the routines that I've built in, and knowing that this is healthy for me, even though sometimes it's just I can easily slack off and nobody's gonna tell me what to do. So yeah.
Thank you all, and thanks so much for your honesty. I think definitely there has been what I would call the exposition of sin. A lot of things that we were able to kind of sweep under the rug or kind of keep hidden. I feel like a lot has been surfacing, and maybe that's one of the positives that has come from this, as we're in many ways forced to deal with our sin nature. And so, once again, thank you all for your honesty, and definitely it reminds us that to keep in prayer for one another, and that only the Savior is truly the perfect one. With that, we do have a question in our Q&A box. is asked from Don, and he's asking, what do you see as the lasting effects of COVID on the church, whether ecclesiastically, spiritually, ministerially, etc.?
Yeah, I was talking with our youth director Josiah just a little bit before this, and well, one of the things, yeah, change is going to happen one way or the other. I was just talking about, hey, what if there are some of our middle schoolers who started puberty like right before this pandemic, and they're going to come back to church and they're going to look completely different. There's certainly going to be changes. Uh, Brett McCracken, he was one of the editors for Gospel Coalition. He said, and I'm, you know, there's a lot of different thoughts on this, but one of the things he said was that this will put an end to like consumer Christianity. And maybe it will, in the sense that as we open things back up, there will be people who feel like, hey, you know what, church as I knew it is no longer the place that it once was. There may be some changes in that regard, or maybe it will lead to the rise of a different kind of consumerism where people feel like, I love worshiping from the comfort of my own home. I don't have to get my kids ready. We can just continue to live stream worship or watch it on video. But certainly like video stuff is going to be here to stay. I think we're going to need to continue to amp up and ramp up our digital game, digital giving. Some people, churches will realize that, yeah, we don't need to be together all the time, and Zoom meetings are a completely viable option for an increasingly busy society and culture in which the technology is available to us. I think all of those things will certainly change. One of the great gifts that I have come to realize, as Pastor John was talking about, how this is such uncharted territory for so many of us that we have no one to look to say, hey, what do you do in a situation like this? What it's done, at least in my context, is it's really heightened the sense of community and collegiality and dependence, interdependence on one another within like my own network. So yeah, a group of pastors that I meet with across the country, a lot of them in California, a lot of them scattered in different places, just sharing their ideas. And that has been a bi-weekly like lifeline for me. There's guys within our denomination that we're bouncing ideas off of each other and just sharing frustrations, struggles, joys, best practices. This morning, I came from a gathering with other, like some church planters in my area. We're serving food to those who were economically distressed, and they're just driving through picking up food that we had, gotten donated. But these kinds of partnerships, which were there in rudimentary, or hey, we should do this, we should collaborate together, has really been amped up. And that sense of, man, we can do so much better together for the kingdom than we could do alone. There are things that you're doing and things that that I have no clue. Things like that. I would hope and imagine that the dependence and the working together of churches is going to continue to increase. I think that would be a great fruit of this. Man, I don't know, but one of the pastors in my group, he's probably the Yoda of our group in Illinois. He said, when this pandemic comes and goes, there will be something else that comes. And again, depending on your eschatology, you could see it whatever way you want. But one of the things that he's saying is we really need to prepare our churches to raise up disciples who will really count the cost to follow Christ no matter what, in the face of persecution, in the face of what Jesus describes to be challenging times as we get closer and closer to his return. But again, it's testing the spiritual fiber and strength and vitality and authenticity of the faith of many of our people. And for some, that's been great. For others, we've been tested and been found lacking. But I think that's one of the things that maybe there will be a thinning out at a certain level, but hope would be one of the lasting effects of this.
Yeah, I agree. I think it really, I'm hoping, I guess, that this will be a lasting effect more than anything. Like Pastor DL said, that the the desire and hunger for what community actually is. I just find a lot of people asking what truly is a family in Christ, what is a community that truly loves each other. Because when you're stripped apart from each other and you can't physically meet and can't do the normal things as you do, you really have to ask yourself what creates a genuine community, you know. So I just find a lot of people asking that, especially among church leaders. We have a coalition of pastors that we get together once a month up here. We do Good Friday service. We did it actually together online. And my second point is I think the pastors and church leaders are actually questioning what is our true gifting and what does God provide for us with our unique identity and calling, and what is our unique position to kind of please the Lord. And it's making us think way outside of just like my church, my own community, but community at large, and realizing the need to really connect with others. You know, we need to learn from each other, and we need to, rather than one thing I felt like was, soon as this hit, like all the pastors were talking to each other. We all had the same questions. You know, how do we do this? What are you going to do about this? What are you going to do that? And for me, I found that very helpful because we're just bouncing off ideas about what to do because we're all in it together and we all have to come up with a similar solution. And I realized, oh, if I didn't have these relationships built before, I mean, what would it feel like? I would feel so alone by myself trying to figure things out just within my own church or my own community, my own family. And so I hope this is challenging people to think outside of just our own church and actually question what is your church community's strengths and weaknesses, because it's really being exposed in a corporate community level too, not just individual strengths and weaknesses. So I think hopefully this will help us to mend some of the weaknesses. And if there are strengths that we can share with each other and really learn from each other. And I think, I guess, I don't know if this is actually what's going to happen, but I'm hoping that that's a lasting effect.
I think for my group, you know, they're, again, you guys all minister to adults, but I think for children or just, you know, people under 18, I feel like for them, it's going to be about looking back to this time. And the person who, Dawn, right? Dawn asked a question, what is the lasting effect? I think for them, it's going to be when they look back in 5 years, how did I spend this time? For a lot of my seniors, they're devastated. They're losing their graduation, prom, everything that they've looked forward to, everything they've worked towards. And for them, it's, you know, I don't know, for us on the other side, we're like, oh, it's just one part of your life. It's not that big of a deal. But for them, it's like everything. So I think as their spiritual leader, I'm just trying to help them interpret it in a way that would be, one, glorifying to God, and two, that they would be able to come to a place where they thank God and they feel like, you know, even though I'm losing this part, I've gained something out of it. And it may be something that's, I'm praying by God's grace that it will be visible to them, whatever it is that they may gain. Maybe it's, you know, more patience, or from it, they've like good, strong friendships been birthed because they're on FaceTime all the time. I don't know. I'm just praying that when they look back to this time, they would find it to be a sweet memory, even though it looks very different. Because I think for them, that's the lasting thing that they're going to remember. So, yeah.
All right, we have another question from Stacy in the Q&A. She wrote, our church has been trying to help families worship together online by providing bilingual worship message for the families of children and youth, with the intention of children, youth, and parents worshiping together rather than apart as was the case when we had church at church. I know many churches have chosen to prepare separate worship services or video lessons for children, youth, and parents. What are you and your churches aiming to do for intergenerational worship during this time that families are at home? What are your thoughts about how to help families connect and grow spiritually during this time?
Yeah, great question, Stacy. I think at our church, we already have adapted to the intergenerational model of church. So even when we physically met, we had service with the children about 5-6 times a year. Youth group being in with adults all year long because we are all English speaking, so we don't have that language barrier. So I guess that makes it a little bit easier since we're an independent church. But right now, during the pandemic, I fully agree with you. I think what it's doing is stretching our creativity to think outside of the box, because the reality is a lot of the parents, especially with younger children, they're there and you can just throw another iPad or computer in the other room and do a separate program. But if you can think outside of the box, there might be creative ways to do service together. Now, although at our church right now, we're doing 3 weeks pre-recorded and then 1 week Zoom. And the Zoom service, we do it all with the children. So we're trying to keep that intergenerational model, but we do understand that for parents with younger children, it is very difficult to literally sit down and listen to a message and entire worship, not quote unquote be for them. So on those intergenerational family church worship days, obviously the worship to, prayer to the video images and the message itself has to be catered towards the children as well. So I think it's just giving us creative ways to actually perhaps manufacture different ways to do the church. And I would personally encourage churches to try it out because I think it's quote unquote much easier to do it right now when everyone's together at home anyway. So I think that's been helpful.
Any other comments to that question?
So yeah, the way that we've been doing it, so my church has 2 services, KM and EM. And for my youth group students and children's church, they actually sit in with the EM parents, or if their parents are Korean speaking, then they can't understand Korean message. So they would sit in on the English message. And then afterwards, I actually hold a sermon discussion, a post-sermon discussion with my youth group kids to just help them understand the sermon a little bit better. Because when my senior pastor, when he preaches, he his target is the older crowd or the adults. So sometimes he uses big words that my students can't really understand. So I find, for the youth group kids to sit in with their parents during English service is easy for them, but they need some follow-up. So that's how I've been encouraging the kids to just sit through the worship with their parents, and then afterwards we can get together and talk about it. And then there's another option for the parents to actually lead Bible study on their own. So for our entire education department, we create Sunday packages for parents. So after the parents, I guess they sit with their kids for worship, they can use the package that we prepare that's on the sermon to lead a Bible study on their own, if they so desire. But again, because there's a language barrier, I try to help the parents out by hosting just another Zoom meeting right after the sermon to help them get the message for that weekend. So that's an idea that may be helpful for you and your church context.
I would imagine that this question may be relevant even when things initially open up in that first phase when churches do begin meeting in their space. All the conversations that I'm having with people about their fears as things open back up is, what are we going to do with the kids and the little ones, and we can social distance, but can they? There are conversations I think pastors are having about having children worship with their parents together. at least for some period of time. And whether that's a church policy or not, I would imagine that there will be some parents that choose to do that. At our congregation, we have our youth worship like Pastor John's with our adults as well. And there are questions that, like Pastor Amy, as soon as worship service is done, there are breakouts into each grade that a teacher will facilitate. And there are questions that are sent online to apply the teaching from the sermon into kind of breaking it down into life and being able to share that. So within our children's ministry, yeah, they don't listen to the same sermon. They have their own service and things. And then handouts are available for the parents to continue to engage in discussion. Yeah, and there's obviously communication during this season is so important. And so through Kakao or through different means, PDFs and things are sent forth. But I mean, I would imagine that a lot of the attendees may be in similar situations as Stacy, and yeah, would have some thoughts to offer as well. I don't know if that kind of forum is available, but
Yeah, I mean, I'll say, we tried the Zoom with the children, and it's really fun. And I know it's a little chaotic, but when do you ever imagine a service where you get to actually see everyone's faces and parents and kids interacting? Because we go in, we drop the kids off, we go to the adults, and we see each other hour and a half, 2 hours later. Hopefully, no longer than that. But like Zoom service, we tried like magic tricks work really well on the camera. There's a lot of deception you can do, a lot of fun activities you can do. And I think that's what I meant by like trying to squeeze creativity out of us to say, hey, we don't have to do church the way we've always known how to do it. This actually gives us a perfect excuse perhaps to try it differently. And, if it fails, it fails. But I think just seeing the context of how you're gathering people is so significantly different. I think we need to use that as an advantage that we have right now, rather than using it as a disadvantage, trying to copy or replicate exactly what we've been doing.
Thought came into mind just hearing you all share, and I think those are some wonderful ideas. I especially really like the Sunday package for the families. I think that's wonderful. Something that I feel like being challenged with being a senior high in education pastor is I wonder if the current paradigm, the current model of a lot of churches in general, even outside of Asian American churches, have gone a little too far in catering towards having a unique worship service for each age group, by children, age level, grade level, and an adult service, and not having enough family coming together to worship, where that has almost created a dichotomy that worship is just for Sundays and just set apart for that day, and there's not enough encouragement to worship together at home. So in other words, to equip, train, and empower parents to be the spiritual leaders the other 6 days. And so I would just love to hear some of your thoughts and ideas, that whether you're doing it now or some of your dreams and visions that you would hope to do as a result of all of this, but how we can better restore worship to be something that's 24/7, something that doesn't just happen in a small group gathering or a church building, but that comes from the natural overflow of just fellowshipping at home, being stuck together.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I have to say, because well, one, because I feel like for the kids, it's really hard for them to spend time with their parents right now. And it's unfortunate, but I feel like for them, it's harder for them to feel like worship is a parent with children, or like parent with their children thing. And I think it's the churches, well, at least for my church, our model has always been separation. Like Pastor John said, you drop the kids off and you see them an hour and a half later. So for us to encourage that worship from Monday through Sunday, and not just as that Sunday thing, is really difficult. But I feel I do want to say though, I think my kids have all grown in understanding that even though right now they're being stuck at home, God is using the environment to sanctify them. So I don't know if that is encouraging for the parents, but at least for my students and the children's church, they've adapted to this environment of how God is using it to sanctify them. And in terms of the parents, I think it's just good communication with the senior pastor. Our education department has to always, we're always talking to our senior pastor and making sure that he's preaching from the pulpit on encouraging the parents, because I think the parents are also very burnt out at this point. And as education ministry leaders, we are trying to offer opportunities to engage the kids and the parents. So for example, like VBS in the summer, we're not canceling it, but we're actually just going to do it online, and we're going to be sending out packages for parents to do it with their children. So just like Pastor John said, being creative and trying to squeeze that out of every single event that we can possibly do with our children, and having the parents being involved. Yeah.
Yeah, I think for maybe a couple things that I might add to what Pastor Amy said. Part of the fruit of having done this an intergenerational, so to speak, sixth grade on up to the oldest adults, an intergenerational, multi-generational congregation for the past 19 years, is that our youth students, when they graduate from high school, the congregation that they would graduate into is not a completely foreign congregation. It's the congregation that they've always been involved with adults that they've seen week in and week out, with natural opportunities to have built mentoring relationships. When a testimony is shared from the congregation, from a 25-year-old female or a 35-year-old businessman or a 45-year-old couple as they come back from a mission trip, implicitly the message that's being communicated to these 12-year-old students is that Jesus is, and the gospel is something that doesn't just last until I graduate from high school and then I can do whatever I want to do. I can make it on my own. I can choose my own adventure apart from Christ. But Jesus is real in the life of this 25-year-old, 35-year-old, 45-year-old. Maybe there's a relevance to Jesus in all areas of life, even in college. I think that's one of the things that having those kinds of, and the Bible is so consistently clear that the passion of God is obviously for salvation, obviously for the nations, but there is a longing and a heart of God for generations to really be able to declare his song and his praises from one to another. The other thing that I'll say is somewhat anecdotally, but I think back in 2008, Dr. Josephine came and she shared at our church about cultural differences, mental health amongst Asian Americans, and things of that nature. And so after she spoke to our entire church, which was Korean-speaking, English-speaking youth, children, all those folks. And as a result of that, we felt like, yeah, we need to continue to press and open up doors and walk through doors that were unlocked or that were opened up during that time. And so since then, we have done, it was every other month, and now it's quarterly, what we call parte times, parent, teacher, and youth, where we will have a topic, it's communication or cultural differences, or what I love about my parents, what I love about my kids, love languages. And there would be a teaching that would be done in a large group format, and then they would break up into their respective grades and classes, and there would be discussion based around those things. And some of the things are like, hey, what was your dream, mom and dad? What was your dream job as a kid? Like, what did you want to be? Or how did you come to know Jesus? Or if parents don't come to church, hey, why'd you decide to come today? Or What is your New Year's resolution? Things like that that are very simple, innocuous questions. But unless there's a context, a forum, then a lot of times those conversations will not be had. And so what that did is it allowed, hey, let's begin to have conversations about things that are deeper than what you want for Christmas, and really engaging in discussion. And I think that took a lot of the awkward edge off of let's sit together, and from going to like, we're not going to talk at all together because of a language barrier or because we just don't talk about spiritual things, to, hey, pastor said we need to have family worship, so let's sit down, hold hands, and sing a song, and that's completely awkward to them. It really was a kind of a step-by-step thing into empowering families to be parents, to be the spiritual leaders. And that's several times a year we have weeks where we're fasting dinners, Passion Week, or as we're praying for a different topic throughout the year. And during those times, in lieu of dinner, we encourage families, hey, let's have family worship, and just giving a real basic framework. Read a passage, talk about it, sing a song, pray, go around and share prayer requests. But I think a lot of families may want to do it, but they think it's daunting, or they don't know how, or they don't think they, I think it doesn't take as much as people think, and just giving that and empowering the parents and putting it back in their hands to say, hey, you can do this. You just need to be spending time with God, have a Bible verse, and be able to pray and maybe lead a song. So I think that, that can be helpful in just giving the tools necessary, and then giving them the motivation to say that, yeah, you can do this. It's not as difficult, and you don't have to sound like Pastor John or Pastor DC or Pastor Amy. You can just be yourself and lead your family in that way.
Thank you. That was wonderful. Adding to my own ministry toolbox and sets of ideas. I love the collaboration.
I'll make sure to give you credit though, Pastor David, if I do use it.
Just the first time. After that, it's public domain. It's all you.
Okay.
Your idea.
Pastor Amy, you mentioned this briefly, and it also addresses one of our questions in the Q&A. But you said you guys have decided for VBS to be online.
Yes.
Yeah. So I'd like to hear our panelists and just kind of how this has changed your summer plans of all the ministries that were supposed to happen in the next few months.
Yeah. So for VBS, we're going to move it online, and we're just going to do 1 hour block in the morning for 4 days. The discussion was, do we do 2 hours? So 1 hour in the morning, 1 hour in the afternoon, or do we want to do more? And we've come down to the conclusion, and we also did some testing with like, just how long can we keep the kids engaged, and how long can the parents do this? Because the parents' involvement is very crucial to whether or not we can even do it online. So we've concluded that 1 hour is probably a really good time frame for the parents to sit down with their kids and help them do craft, and for the kids to be engaged through the screen. So what we're going to do is 4 days, 1 hour each day. And yeah, that will be our VBS this year. For missions trip, we're probably canceling all of them just because it's just, we can't. And then my kids are super disappointed, but they won't be having their own retreat this summer. And yeah, they're really sad, but it's what needs to be done. So we're trying to focus on our family retreat that's going to be on Labor Day weekend. So that's something that we're looking forward to, but everything else is pretty much canceled. Yeah.
Pastor John, has there been any changes to your church's summer ministry plans?
Yeah, I mean, my co-pastor, Pastor 1J Hudson Yu, had this phenomenal idea of doing reverse missions. So we were actually really super, super excited to bring in all our missionaries internationally to the US. We were in the process of getting visas, finding them homes to stay with, and we had this whole program set up. I think it looks like those summer plans are all going to have to be canceled. But in midst of that, I think what we're finding out is we are speaking to those missionaries out there who are having difficult time, and it just hits you, right? Like, oh, it's not just us here in the U.S. who's affected by this. This is throughout the world. We just got a phone call from our missionary partners in India, northern India, who the ladies, Devadasis, who are, the low caste temple prostitutes, they're calling us to let us know that they're not allowed to step outside of their house, their huts, and so they can't work. And so the minimum wage that they do make, they can't even make that. So they're actually starving and they're suffering, and the kids are, some of them are having to throw away their children. So there are a lot more devastating things that are happening in the world. So we're just trying to implement. If we can't do the reverse missions and we can't send out missionaries, then what else can we do? And try to, once again, creatively figure out how to use the resources that we were planning on using in different directions. So our session is going to meet this Sunday, and hopefully quickly send out whatever we can to the communities in India and so forth. So yeah, like the VBS, we haven't really thought about it yet. We're probably having to get there. But yeah, there are a lot of summer retreats, a lot of larger church gatherings, picnics. Those are all being canceled as we speak. But once again, I think you just have to think outside the box and figure out what's the best way. So one church I know nearby us, they were able to do outdoor parking lot, where in the olden days where they used to have screen out there and you can watch a movie and you can tune into the radio, something like that. I had a Catholic priest friend who were doing drive-by confessions. So I thought that was pretty creative. I've seen a lot of video clips, and us included, we were doing communion online. Very creative ways of people doing communion right now. So there are definitely things that are obviously being canceled for the summer and perhaps even beyond. But there's so many different ways. You just have to speak to each other and look up things. And there are different ways to share those resources and the strengths that each church has to provide for the community and those who we serve.
Pastor John, I heard that one of the Catholic archbishops was discouraging people from coming to confession, saying that they could now just confess straight to God and they could be forgiven.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Those churches changing it. Our theology is, I think, being stretched as well.
Someone said that the most worthless purchase of 2019 was a 2020 planner. If people still use such things on paper, but man, maybe one of the things that's happening, we've pretty much canceled everything, all of our retreats, mission trips, gatherings, conferences, all that stuff, canceled, at least in the form that they once were to be held in. But I wonder if there might be like a certain kind of beauty in just like a simple church. I think there was a book called Simple Church. I never read it, but I was just like, yeah, that sounds awesome. Like doing nothing for a year, but going back to the basics. My the senior pastor at our church here, Korean speaking pastor, he as he read through the Great Commission, what he was reading, and this is kind of people who kind of flow in the same stream as him, see the Great Commission as the mission of Jesus to the church. And the whole premise of the Great Commission was to make disciples. And we do that by baptizing them in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, and then teaching them obedience to everything that Jesus commanded. And what our pastor said was, if a gathering of people who calls themselves a church isn't doing that, then it's not a church. Like, you could call it whatever you want. And so when he first came to our church in 1999, he said, this church isn't doing that. Until they do it, we're not going to call ourselves a church. And so he went to the church sign in the front of the property and he sawed it in half. And he's like, we're not a church. And so he said, we're going to rebuild our church on what the Bible says we need to be doing. We're going to worship well, we're going to pray, and we're going to study the Word of God. He canceled everything else. And he said from there, church really began to grow and grow in its health, and the toxicity that was there began to kind of trickle out as people were becoming more and more like Christ. And so absolutely, I think we need to innovate, but I think there's a special gift in also thinking through, yeah, if and not for the sake of being lazy or not thinking, but for the sake of really thinking through and thoughtfully saying, maybe for this season, this is God's gift to us to really do these particular things really well, and to really, as long as those things are what's essential and essential to the mission and to the worship of the church.
I'm also beginning to think, as we go ahead and cancel or postpone a lot of the ministry plans we already had, possibly this is also a wonderful time to really reevaluate the blueprint and DNA of our church. Is our vision, our mission statement, the core values that we have on our websites and that we share with our congregation members, their membership class, are these still really holding up in the midst of a pandemic and a crisis? And so, yeah, I think it'll be a great time for reevaluation from the leadership side of stuff as well. I do want to get to Samuel's question in a little bit. Sorry, Samuel, I will definitely get to yours. But our brother Ben has asked, how has the church responded to the loss that has happened during this time, whether they are directly affected by the coronavirus or through a consequence of the coronavirus, such as the inability to gather for funerals and some funeral homes not being open? How does the church care for those in direct loss and approach other members of the body that may be suffering? And maybe I can begin by asking Pastor John. I did see you are Dr. John with a degree in counseling. And so maybe this is something that you could share a little bit more insight about how to soul care for those who are directly dealing with loss right now.
Yeah, I think Ben's question and Sam's questions are interlinked. You know, it comes back to the topic of care and counseling for our members who have, faced extreme loss. We have, none of our direct members have been impacted, but our members' parents, uncles, and aunts have passed away from COVID. We're in northern New Jersey, right? We're 30, 40 minutes from New York City. We have, probably half of our health workers are all still working in hospitals in front line. So we're constantly talking about this. How do you deal with loss? And, I don't know if there's a simple answer to this, such a complex question, other than, what can we do as pastors and church leaders? And what we can do is provide care and counseling still, and show them that we still love them. And this kind of goes back to something that I always want to, when I teach courses in pastoral care and counseling for future pastors in training, is that, you have to prepare and you have to be ready to deal with some of the losses you've personally dealt with in your own life. Not that it's going to exactly be the same for others, especially during this COVID-19, but you have to be in tune with some of the losses that you've dealt with personally in order to be able to empathize the best that you can with others who are going through this. Once again, it doesn't mean that we can understand exactly what they're going through, but it's perfect time to contact these families and individuals who have gone through this loss and let them know, hey, I don't know what you're going through, but I am here for you. And reality is practically what can you do, because so many funerals are being canceled and you can't even visit, the family members can't even visit the ones that have passed away. So physically, I don't know there's much you could do, but I think it is time to call upon your church and hopefully encourage your congregation members who are going through this to, hopefully be able to feel comfortable enough to share, so that everyone can just pray together and really love on them and encourage people and provide venues in which church leadership can create, so that it's easier perhaps for people to reach out and share how much they love them. I mean, it's a very good question, Ben, but it's a very difficult one. How does the church respond to loss that has happened during this time? Those who are especially directly affected. I mean, at least at our church, what we've been doing is obviously showing much more care by much more calls, flowers, visitations to the family with distance. But one thing that churches really are struggling right now, I think, is how do these people and who can they reach out to? So I think churches need to formulate, if they don't already, have a plan to connect with counselors nearby in the churches, create a network of some sort so that these people are not just receiving love directly from the church community, but they really need to be able to process some of these losses, with professionals. So you need to be able to find out what type of mental health professionals are nearby and who among them can really partner with your church and your ministry. I understand that majority of the churches don't have that set up already. So this is just more of a challenge for you who don't have those networks set up. Hopefully you feel this pressure and a burden to do so, perhaps once this ends. And it's not already too late, call some of these counselors up. In fact, find out who are the counselors in your church, you know, among your friends, and get the information. And because a lot of these counselors, especially who are dealing with grief and losses, will do counseling sessions online. And that's another way I think churches can participate. Pay for those sessions. Don't ask these counselors to just do it for free. I'm sure many of them would, but provide financial needs and put in ministry budgets in there from the beginning, and understand taking care of our mental, emotional health is directly related with our spiritual health. So I hope that, with the loss question and mental health question, the churches are really preparing, and thinking about this much more seriously.
One of my friends is going through a sermon series on the particular emotions that we're dealing with, or the particular challenges that COVID-19 situation has brought up, things like addiction, abuse, and one of the things is grief. And if we are able to, from the pulpit or from whatever platform we can teach, to give people the permission to grieve and to be able to share that, and to embrace it as the gift that it is. I think Peter Scazzaro, Emotionally Healthy Spirituality, says embracing grief is what enlarges our soul to be able to love other people and to engage in the depth of compassion. And I think that's what Pastor John was saying, is we have to be willing to explore those areas of grief so that we can enter into it. And so right before this hit, and before we had to go to online worship, we were going through a series on emotionally healthy spirituality, and got to the end of it. And a lot of that was, for me, just exposing my soul and my hurt and my pain and my difficulty and my journey towards emotional, spiritual, mental health, and involving seeking therapy and counseling and things like that. And that really did lead to a lot of, and thankfully, because I'm in the city in which I went to seminary, and the seminary has a counseling program, and a lot of my friends went through that program, there are people that I can refer to, which has been a gift to me, because it's kept me sane in a lot of ways. I mean, obviously, as pastors, we want to be there for our people. We want to be able to walk with them through the valley of the shadow of death. But at a certain point, we realize that I am not the person to take you to the next level, but there's someone who is able to. And so I think, like Pastor John said, having a network is crucial. Yeah, absolutely, for our mental health and our sanity as we seek to shepherd the souls of our congregation, but also for our parishioners as well.
Pastor Amy, being in youth ministry right now, I'm sure you have some parents who do share with you, or even students who may share with you what they don't share with their parents. And so how have you, have there been any students who have reached out during your 2 months of kind of quarantine work at home regarding mental health, or even before all of this began? And how have you kind of helped them and guided them to be able to address what they're struggling with?
Yeah, so for me, I'm sort of, I guess I am their counselor. So it's been challenging because obviously for my male students, it's harder for me to do counseling. So I would refer them to other male teachers, or just people who have a heart for youth and my friends that I can trust, I usually refer them if it's a serious counseling and like they need some immediate guidance. Or else I try to build, I guess, just a daily conversation on how they're doing. I think for youth students, it works best that way, because if you just suddenly reach out and be like, hey, how are you doing? You know, how's life going? What are you struggling with? They don't usually open up. So I've been spending a lot of time just texting and calling. I've also taken over all of the small groups. So I do Zoom meetings every single day with my students, just to make sure that my presence is still felt in their life, even though it's virtually. And just make sure that they know I am here for them. Yeah, it's hard because even without COVID, right, I have students with family members who are suffering from cancer, or who are just having a really hard time mentally as well. So these students, thankfully, God has brought them to me. And that was my prayer in the beginning, because I do have a pretty large size youth group. And, you know, I said, God, I'm limited, I'm finite. I really don't have the bandwidth to have a good relationship, or, you know, a deep relationship with all of the students. But I pray you would bring them to me if I need to serve them, or you could at least make them known so I can refer them to somebody else. So, you know, while I listen to Pastor David and Pastor John, I'm just nodding my head, because I feel like counseling is such a big part of ministry, and be able to know you have other people to lean on who can offer the, you know, wisdom, the same kind of wisdom or even better wisdom than you can, is really important. So that's actually something I'm currently working on as well, just to make sure I know other people, my students can also, that I trust, that I can refer my students to. So that's sort of been what I'm doing. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Samuel, hopefully we're able to answer your question. And we have some comments also from Chun-Shin Taylor regarding this topic that we're talking about, kind of the reluctance of leadership, of pastors, to release their congregation, to seek that professional help. But from what I've heard from our three panelists, I think we do recognize that we can't be everything. We can't do everything. And there are times where we do need to call on professional help, many times actually. And so maybe that is the most caring thing we can do at that time, is just to share with them, hey, this is as far as I can take you, and I would like to refer you to somebody else who can take you deeper and help you in ways that I may not be able to. And so he does follow up with the question, what are your thoughts about his experience, his or her experience as a professional counselor trying so hard to connect with the church leadership, but seem to hit a huge barrier? And I feel like this is more, at least from the kind of conversations that I've had, more unique to Asian American churches. From what I've seen, I think a lot of more Western American churches are open to that counseling. It's not as taboo or as shunned. But I have seen a lot of this, and even discouragement from other leadership that I've served under, to let their flock to be able to go to a professional Christian counselor. And so, yeah, just would love to hear any of your thoughts regarding that barrier that Chun-Shin has hit when trying to encourage professional counseling and recommending it to the church leadership.
Thank you, Chun-Shin, and also Samuel. And maybe I can kind of try to answer parts of both questions. I think what Chun-Shin brings up is the reality. I think there is a huge divide even in the discipline of psychology and counseling versus theology and spiritual disciplines. It's always been, if you read the history, and especially among Asian American churches, there definitely is some cultural taboo that we have to fight against. And one of it is that pastors and church leadership don't want to let go of the reign of what they consider leadership and good leadership, which is, I will take care of all my flock. And if anything outside of our church community, I don't know if I can trust it. I don't know if I have the time and the resources to, or energy to pour in to check in and check out all these people and all these. But this is my thing for the pastors and leadership is, look, you can't do it by yourself. You know that deep down inside. So you have to reach out. And if the question is, who are the right people to reach out. Look, some you're not going to really jive with. Some counseling centers and some counselors might have a different philosophy in how they take care of the people. But you have to hopefully be open-minded enough to understand you might not know what's best for your congregants, you know, and the congregants do and should have the freedom to receive different types of help than the type of help that you and your church only provides. So this is just a push, really a challenge for the pastors and the leadership to go find the counselors nearby, counseling centers nearby, and just speak to them, just have coffee, you know, buy them lunch and hear from them what they're doing in their work, what they're experiencing, and what are the challenges. And to be able to connect with these counselors, it's a huge benefit for the church. I'll just give you an example. For us here in Northern Jersey, we've been fortunate enough that we have a very tight-knit group of pastors that we meet up once a month, pray together and share, and we actually turned it into a nonprofit. And then from that meeting like that for 10 years, although I've been talking about this for 10 plus years, after 10 years of building relationship, we finally got to a point where pastors began to start speaking to me about, hey, we have these congregants that I'm wanting to refer, but I don't know who. So recently, we actually got 5 churches to get together to create a separate nonprofit counseling network group, where we found 12 counselors or professionals, whether pastoral counselors or clinicians, psychiatrists, and psychologists who are licensed, who are Christians, but don't necessarily do Christian counseling, okay? But they are Christians themselves, and we decided to meet up with these counselors one-on-one, buy them coffee, buy them a meal, hear their story out, their conviction, their personal testimony about why they decided to go into counseling. And what you realize is they went in order to serve the church, to serve God. But oftentimes in the church, those counselors, people with those type of giftings, are not utilized at all. They're thrown maybe at best. Once again, nothing wrong with prayer teams and welcoming teams and things like that, but at best they're thrown into those categories. But it's time to create a new quote unquote department, different areas of need that we have to address. And you know, people will come together, but I think the church leaders do have to take the forefront. Last thing for the counselors, if you're a counselor yourself, I think there are 3 practical things that you can do right now. 1, please send resources to the churches that you have relationship with, to the pastors. Resources meaning books that you really loved reading, links, articles about, you know, mental health related issues, and hopefully pastors will respond positively. 2nd, I hope that you can offer counseling services online and be in touch with some of the pastors and, you know, maybe discounted rate, I don't know, but figure something out where you can provide those counseling. And thirdly, I think you can maybe do some kind of self-care projects online, do some video logging, talking about some, you know, hot topics like, you know, how to deal with depression when you're alone at home right now during pandemic, navigating relationship issues. I know I'm getting a lot of phone calls 11, 12, 1 a.m. about couples who are, you know, pulling their hair out because, you know, maybe we're not made to spend that much time together all the time. I don't know. But, you know, we need some tools and tips on how to navigate those areas. And if you have the tools and you're a professional counselor, hopefully you can connect with some of the churches and provide those.
Yeah, maybe if I could just add to, I mean, Pastor John is the counseling guru, so I don't have much to add, but one of the things that we did at a pastor's gathering for our denomination is we had Pastor John come and share and do some teaching. And so that might be something that if you are a mental health professional or, you know, counselor, you can offer that service, especially during time like this, and piggybacking on what one of our colleagues had asked on the Q&A. But hey, I would love to share about grief and how to process through COVID-related grief. Maybe that can be a workshop that can be offered so that it gives people, pastors, an understanding who aren't familiar with the ins and outs of mental health counseling and what it's about, to know what kind of services are offered and how it's you know, biblically relevant and practical. I think that would be helpful. And the other thing I would say to, I guess, Chun-Shin is, you have to keep on doing what you're doing, because as PJ said, it does get better, and people will eventually respond when they need to. And here in our context, the journey towards removing the stigma in an Asian American church, like I fought a lot of battles. I, as a seminarian, was encouraged by my seminary as a future pastor, missionary. All of you should go seek counsel. One, so that you can help counsel others. Two, so that you can know the value of it in your professional life. But three, so that you can work through issues that you have not worked through, blind spots, that you have no idea why you do the things that you do, but it's just kind of your default. So as a seminarian without money, the counseling fees were $120 for a 50-minute session. Ridiculous. Actually, it's not ridiculous. It was worth it. But when I asked my senior pastor, he's like, heck no, ain't no way that our session is going to pay for that. I had issues with my parents. I got beat by my dad, and I just prayed and I'm fine now. That's what he said. About 10 years later, he said to me, David, do you think I need to see a counselor? So things change, right? We do begin to realize. And so, yeah, I mean, I think with more advocates like people like Pastor John and others, I think the mental health, and again, because it's becoming a lot more out there with celebrities, athletes, Korean pop stars dealing with it, I think it's only going to get better. And so, yeah, I appreciate Chun-Shin as a person, as their heart and expertise. And I would just encourage, please keep doing it, because we need people like you in the fight, and we need to partner with people like you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I mean, just a little bit of, I don't know if this will put things into context, but at Dallas Theological Seminary, where I was required to take 120 credit hours to graduate with a Master of Theology, only 3 of those were 3 credit hours, which was 1 class, was a required pastoral counseling, Christian counseling class. And the one thing that I learned from that class, our takeaway, was how ill-equipped I was to be able to handle these things. And so, for sure. And Dr. Joe did type in the chat, if you are a counselor, please send churches resources. Please introduce yourselves to the church leadership, any resources that you may have. Yeah, in the words of one of my mentors, is we're not here to compete. We're here to complete each other. And so we definitely need help on that front. We're running out of time here. And so there was a question that was asked earlier that I do want to get to. It's a question by Jeffrey. Going forward, do you see online services changing in any way in terms of variety, format, Q&A, interviews? And I think we did kind of mention some of these in our previous answers, but any of the pastors, any ways that you see your online services changing in any way?
Yeah, I feel like once we can start meeting at church again, probably won't be as frequent, because the hope is to eventually go back to just meeting at church, right? So online meetings will probably not be as frequent, but it'll still be offered as we adjust back. But I think all of us are prepared for church to look different after this pandemic. Yeah. But online meetings, it won't be as frequent as it is right now.
I think churches are exploring different options of teaching online, which we were doing Bible study online. And I found it, I've always been against it, honestly. When seminaries asked me to teach online courses, I've said no so far for the past few years, but now I'm thinking twice about it, because I'm trying it, and you realize, with the physical distance, that there are different ways to teach and learn. And even, like game nights and stuff like that, or we're doing a one-on-one FaceTime prayer nights where you call in and prayer team will pray with you. So like Pastor Amy said, I don't think it's gonna, be on top of, these are things that can just be added onto the physical meeting up and doing ministry. But I think it's opening up different doors because there are people with disabilities, parents who really can't get out at certain hours, and it's really giving those people access. And I'm actually surprised that those are the people who are actually really enjoying signing up for these things, because and now verbalizing, saying I couldn't sign up for this before because of my schedule or my physical disability. So hopefully churches are being stretched that way too.
I'm going to interpret Jeffrey's question a little bit different, and maybe as it relates to online worship service. I think for some of us, we are recording. I would imagine that maybe half at least are recording services and then premiering them on YouTube or Facebook Live or Facebook or something like that. I think that's certainly going to change. I think it will go to a live stream, definitely, when we're able to do that. Production quality may go down because there will be no, as far as I know, there's not the ability to do live editing of video and audio and things like that. But I have seen churches begin doing things like Q&A times. It's something that the Redeemer Church, Tim Keller, had done for quite a while. And yeah, I could certainly see a lot of mega churches, larger churches are doing that. So I could see how that could be a viable option, especially if this continues and we cannot meet, or some places cannot meet together physically. I can imagine that certainly more of that would take place.
Thank you. We're about out of time here, but maybe if I can ask the final question from Jay to Pastor DL regarding the difference of opinions. We've seen this on the national level, in the state level, in the district level, county levels, of difference of opinions of leaders about safety, shelter at home policies. But this question, I guess, is more specifically for the church. What do you do when there's a difference of opinion for safety of the church members and the timing of coming back to worship in person? Do you have any wisdom on how to navigate those waters?
No. One of the things that I've been just communicating, yeah, Pastor Jay is right. Like, people are everywhere. Some people are like, pretty, hey, let's get back together. As soon as I see you, I'm gonna, there's that Chris Farley meme where he's like running around the audience and giving everybody a high five. There's some people who are like, yeah, let's do that. And then there are others who just feel like, you know what, I'm not coming back until 2021. I think in those situations, I don't know if this is misapplication, but I would say, when Paul says, hey, to the people who feel like you can eat meat that's sacrificed to idols for the sake of the ones who don't believe that you can, hey, just kind of hold off on that so that you don't stumble them. I would say the ones who are more, willing to engage and less concerned about social distancing and things like that should, for the sake of those who are fearful or vulnerable or even mentally vulnerable, that we ought to make concession for them as our way of loving them. And to me, that would be, erring on the side of safety for the sake of the weaker brother or sister. I would encourage that.
Yeah. Thank you so much. That's all the time we have allotted for the panel session. So panelists, all the pastors, thank you all so much for just sharing your hearts with us, sharing your words of wisdom and encouragement. It's been an edifying, sanctifying time. I would like to, at this time, give a couple announcements before I hand it over to Kathy to close for us. As you may already know, Mustard Seed Generation, MSG, is a volunteer-ran organization. And as we saw in the intro video for Dr. Joe, it kind of sprouted from her heart when the shooting happened in Virginia Tech. And that hits near and dear to me because I was a freshman at Virginia Tech when the shooting the first actual 2 shootings happened in the dorm building right across mine, 100 feet away. And so to be able to partner with them and to be able to go through something so traumatizing and to just cling on to Christ all the more through that has been such a wonderful journey. And MSG has been a huge part of that. So if you'd like to support their work or find out more, please head over to their website that's on the screen here. And I'm sorry if we couldn't get to all the questions or if we weren't able to answer everything, but there is a survey following the Zoom meeting that you can write those in. And so we would love to continue to help and support and in any way we can. So at this time, with a big thank you to everybody who joined us, I'm going to hand it back over to Kathy.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much to our panelists, our moderator. I've learned a lot in the process as well, so thank you so much for tuning in. And I just want to, jumping off of what Pastor DC just shared, we will be having more webinars throughout the month of May, so that's just the schedule for you. So next week we will be focusing on families, and this one will be bilingual so that parents and kids can tune in together. This is a segment we often do at our conferences on communication skills between parents and kids. What are some of the triggers that closes conversation? What could you do to open that again? And so we really encourage our parents and our middle high school students to join in. The week after, we will be doing a story time for kids around social-emotional learning, regulating your emotions, which might be really helpful during this time. And then we'll close with a session for college and grad students around a lot of anti-Asian sentiments with COVID, so conversations around that. And then lastly, for high school students, which might be helpful for a lot of youth pastors to share with your students, is especially for students thinking about college and this unprecedented time, how do we think through this? How do we cope with this? How do we support one another in this? And so we hope that you can tune in again with us, and you can register at our website at mustardseedgeneration.org. So thank you again. We will have this recording up after this. So we appreciate you and your time. Thank you.